Hello, everyone. We're going to be interviewing Andy from Pandion Games, and this is amazing because Andy is a fantastic designer. He's a great friend of mine, but also he's designed games with the Breathless system, and we've got the jam going on. So I figured, why not reach out to one of my best friends, have him over, talk about game design, talk about what he's done for the first Breathless jam, what he did to make the system grow, and what he came up with. So Andy, thank you so much.
Thank you for having me. Yeah, I love coming on to talks like this. This is like, I'll nerd out about this for hours. It's good.
Yeah, that's like I'm excited because you're as we were saying just before I pressed on the record button, you're the first person who has agreed to do this with me. So like this is kind of like a beta test. We were talking about names earlier,
Yeah.
and like we'll see what we end up naming this thing, or maybe it won't get a name. It's just going to be Interview with Andy.
Right? Yeah, it's a good beta test to see how it all works.
Yeah. So yeah, how about you introduce yourself to those who don't know you? Who is Andy? What is Pandion Games? What do you do? So yeah, tell us a bit about yourself.
So, hi, I'm Andy. So I'm the founder and designer behind Pandion Games. We're a tabletop game design studio that usually does like narrative first games with our approach and the mechanics. And we try to support creative problem solving within the game rather than just like solving at like tactical combat, right? So we try to think of other ways that we can present games and stories. But yeah, I'm really influenced by like nostalgia, like old towns and autumn and summer camps and old school adventure games, and that's kind of where I get a lot of my ideas from. And you know, I know I've talked to you multiple times where I'm like, RP, like this game is inspired by this like 1989 point and click adventure game, and I can't just be like inspired by Loom, right? And nobody's gonna know what that is. And you're like, yeah, we got to figure out something more modern that you can say it's inspired by. But yeah, I'm absolutely inspired by like old nostalgia video games.
That's so cool. And you've been doing this for a couple of years now.
Since 2021, yeah. So I think we really first dove into like making player supplements for the Quest RPG and kind of dabbled on like my first game design game back in 2020. But Pandion Games itself really was like, oh, we could actually do this. Like, this is a thing that you can do as a human, is make games. That really started in 2021.
That's great. So one thing I'm wondering is you touched a bit on this, is that your games tend to not focus on combat, not focus on violence, and like this is a recurring theme in many of your games, and I'd potentially say all of your games. And I think that like one thing that's very interesting about this is that Breathless in general is a the original game is a pretty violent game because you're survivors in a zombie apocalypse. But when you read the system reference document for the first time, you're like, okay, I need to take this and make it non-violent and still kind of like have something that reinforces the mechanics. So like how did that happen?
Yeah, so I think the important thing there is there's a difference between supporting direct combat and fighting and violence. So a lot of my games have a good deal of violence. Like all of my horror games, very violent, right? It's just you don't have the ability to fight. You don't get a +1 gun in order to gun down the monster. You need to figure out another way to deal with it. But looking at Breathless specifically, I was like, this is a good game that emulates exhaustion of right. That's what your dice mechanics do, where they step down. It's a survival piece, but at the end of the day, it's a simulation. It's a representation of just like as you continue on with whatever it is you're doing, you're getting tired, you're wearing down. And I was like, there's so many really interesting things that you can do with that. I mean, you go out, you know, and do carpentry and construction work, and or even, you know, the grizzled, you know, noir detective. as the day and the night wears on and they're coming up against more and more stuff, they're getting exhausted. They're getting worse at what they do because they're wearing down. And so, yeah, I took a look when I was looking at Breathless. I was like, oh, there's a lot of cool stuff that we could do with this. And that's kind of how it started. I don't think I had the game idea at that point, but I was just like, yes, we need to take something and do something with this.
So one thing I'm curious about is like, was Substratum Protocol your first idea, your first pitch, or did you consider other themes or other kind of settings for, because you joined the first jam in 2021 when it launched. So like I'm wondering, were you thinking about like other kind of settings, or was Substratum Protocol kind of like the first thing that you nailed down?
I believe it was the first thing. So this was back in the Wild West era of our game design days where we were just like, we're gonna throw something at the wall and see if it sticks. And I remember you had the what is it? Loot, shoot, survive as your tagline, which is, by the way, the most brilliant piece of game design slash marketing out there, because so many people take that and they rework those words to be their game's theme. And I remember starting with that, right? I was like, it's not loot, shoot, survive. It's descend, learn. What is it? What did I end up doing?
Yeah,
Descend,
the
learn,
Sandler.
survive, right?
Yeah,
And I was like, okay, what are we doing with this? Like, what are they doing? And I was playing like Subnautica at the time was really big, and I was really into that. And so this idea of like going down into depths, and I was like, oh, there's kaiju, and I think Pacific Rim was released around that time. I literally have Pacific Rim like inspiration photos in the Substratum Protocol folder, and so like this idea of like diving down to the depths, mechs, suits, and then I was like, hold on, what can we do with all of this? And we kind of spawned the idea of like an anomaly, at the center of the earth that you need to go figure out. And since we're not warriors, since we're not combat focused, these are scientists and explorers that are delving the depths to see what the heck's going on, right? To learn. So I think that's how the pitch started, and that was very much within like over the course of an hour. Like that all happened very quick, like opening up a document and just typing it out, and you know letting it come together organically. Um, and then Breathless is so easy to work with. I think you provided templates at that point too, and it was just literally copy and paste the contents of Breathless and going through each section and just being like, nope, we're gonna call it this and we're gonna call it that. So it's on a theme for a mech suit dive towards the center of the earth game, whatever that is, because I had no idea at the time. Um,
right. I
yeah,
find it
and that's
so I find it so interesting that like you started from the tagline and not the mechanics. So you started from like this is the first time I'm hearing this, and I think this is brilliant.
yeah. Well, that's one of the things I love about Breathless is like, so even with the latest game that we made, I didn't promote it quite as hard as like with a Breathless game, but like I even came up with a 3-word tagline again to be
No way.
like, this is brilliant. Like we should be using this because it's so good. Um, but I didn't. Yeah, so I think like as a Breathless game, like if you can come up with your 3 words that describe your game, start there. Absolutely.
It's a bit like a lasers and feelings, right? Where you have like, okay, what are the two stats, or like Honey Heist, like what are my 2 stats? Like as a
That's
Breathless
it.
game, what is your 3-word like thing that you can put on your
Yeah,
game?
exactly. And I think that also like, that's going to help really define what are the skills, what are they going to be their names? How are you going to approach this, right? And it's the design concept of who are the characters, what are they doing, and why are they doing it, right? And you can put you can boil that all 3 of those down to a single word each, and then you have your three character lines. They're descending, they're there to learn, and they're trying to survive, right? There you go, you've answered your 3 questions, and then the rest of the game's like, let's expound upon that, right?
Yeah, this is amazing. Like I think this should have been like I recently recorded videos like how to get started with the breathless jump. It's like no, that should have been it. Like you just figured it out. Um,
It's all well, and everybody's going to approach it differently,
yeah.
right? And I think that's the beauty of it.
So you mentioned that like you started from like one of the templates, or you copied some text from the SRD, right? And then you started going through each of the mechanics and tried to decide like how am I going to shift them and make them my own, because that's kind of like the fun exercise of designing your own game, is that it's not just like, yes, you could take the exact same text, change a couple of words, and then you have a brand new game with a different setting, but tweaking those knobs is, I think, one of the most fun aspects of it all. So, what did you tweak?
So I did this with our Laser and Feelings game, and like especially one pagers and these smaller SRDs. It's really great to say, okay, I love the core system, and I'm going to add one, maybe two things on top of it to play with game design in general, right? And have it maybe tie more thematically into what it is that you're doing. So in Substratum, I was like, well, there's got to be an end game somehow, and what are they trying to achieve, because they're not shooting things, they need to have some sort of goal. And so we implemented this portal data idea, and the portal data is a collectible where instead of collecting health or things like that on your maximum roll, you collected portal data, and the portal data allowed you to solve whatever the anonymity, the portal, or close the portal at the end of the game. And then the second thing I added in and tweaked was this idea of having the different layers where you're diving down and you're going lower. And so those two things were the two things that I really added and tweaked. And then everything else was like renaming and, updating. Like I believe like stress we kept, checks are pretty much the exact same. Take a breath became take a moment, because since it's an expedition, they were like, okay, we're just gonna like camp out for a little bit. So that made sense. But otherwise the wording's the same. Um, Overclock, I forget what you called it, but overclock was basically where like you get to use a D12. Yeah,
Stunts.
on your
Yeah.
what stunts?
Stunts. Yeah.
Stunts. Okay, yeah, yeah. So I called it overclock because they have mech suits, right? And it's like, hey, ramp up and overclock your suit, but you might burn your suit out, right? So different things like that of just like, what was the original purpose of this, and how do I adjust it to make sense for what it is that we were doing? And really that was about it, making new tables, which is always a blast, right? So you take the existing tables and kind of erase them, right? So like items, specialties, complications, we added some creatures in there as well, what the portal data actually was, so you could actually be like, oh, what is that I'm answering or learning about the portal. But otherwise it was really just copy and paste, with these tweaks of these headers, and swapping out the table contents, and really dropping in the narrative pieces. So we've got the intro's different, we've got these little call out boxes that say, hey, this, in world, this is the weird stuff that's going on. And we also added a map, because why not? People love maps.
Well, especially in this context, it makes a lot of sense because you're diving, so you kind of need to know what level you're at and how many feet deep you are, and like what's there. And one thing I'm like, I thought was brilliant is this exactly this idea of that you mentioned earlier about end games, because like there are so many like open adventure games, sandbox games, or just you're dropped in the middle of a very complicated and dangerous world, and you kind of have to do something out of it. Like, but it's your story, and this is something you're going to see often with OSR and NSR games. But in a lot of like very story driven games, you're going to have an end game, and going there is so important. So you mentioned the portal clues. So throughout your expedition you would get clues. How do you interact with them like mechanically to kind of get to the end game?
So I believe, hold on, I gotta like, I don't even remember. So you needed
Yeah, it's
to,
been a
so
while.
it has been a while and it's changed, obviously. We'll get to that later. So originally it was basically on your way down, you needed to collect 4 pieces of data in total. And that required making checks throughout as you were traveling down and as you were trying to survive and as you were making your way to the portal. You had to make these checks that could result in more complications, could result in more dangers. But on your successes, you could either collect portal data or you could collect what we'd call deuterium units, which is how you would power your suit and actually heal yourself of stress and things like that. So you had to make a choice at the time. So you're like, okay, I'm gonna is the loot mechanic. It was like, I need to make a choice. Okay, I could either collect portal data now, which is how we need to be able to beat the game, or I could collect the resource that allows me to continue on longer because I did some crazy stuff and I'm damaged, right? And so
I
you're
love
given that
this.
choice. Um, and that's, yeah, but having that end, I think, was really important. I think it's one of the reasons why a lot of solo games nowadays are doing as well as they are, is because you have that kind of, beginning, middle, and end defined within the game. And so it provides a little bit more structure to players of like, wait, when is this over? Do we just keep going forever? And it's like, no, 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 no. Here, you can keep going as long as you want to, but this is how it ends,
Yeah.
right? And there's a trigger for it.
We're here to tell a very specific story, and here's the framework on how to do so. Here are the procedures to like tell that very specific story, and then when the game is over, you can do whatever you want with it. Like once the portal is closed, you could go back up and like continue
Oh
playing
yeah,
if you wanted to.
yeah, definitely.
So you did Substratum Protocol version 1, released it
Yes.
for the Jam. It was
Yep.
one of the most beloved game, one of the most beloved submission. It stayed at the top for like a very, very long time.
John Harper liked it. John
I
Harper
know.
picked it up, which is crazy. Yeah, I sent you an image of that this morning. I was like, "Do you remember back when?" Yeah, it was great. Yeah, it was a huge thing. I ended up, so it was released as a bifold, or as 8 pages, and I ended up taking it to print. It was one of an early print games, and it did okay. As 8 pages, it was like kind of a flimsy 8 page bifold, like double bifold thing, and I don't think there was a market for it now. I think if we went back and like made it into like a trifold pack, it would do really, really well. But back in 2021, everybody was like, "I need a 200-page book, or I'm not
Yeah.
spending money, right,
But
for
also
print."
that you did that but very quickly. You used a bunch of like freely available assets and fonts that you found
Oh
online
yeah,
and just
oh
like
yeah. This
published
was
it.
this was before I could afford artists or editors or anything. I mean, I mean, we were still very, very new. And so yeah, it was all free content. It was, public domain source stuff. I was learning how to use Affinity Publisher and Designer at the time, and so I was making all my own assets, using Google Fonts for the fonts. So it's very much threw it all together myself pretty quick. We designed it in a week,
Yeah,
like the
that's what I
whole
remember as
thing, like
well.
start to finish. Yeah, and then released it. And like going back to the original document, it's a complete mess, right? And that's okay. It's okay that it's a complete mess. I didn't know what I was doing, and you don't have to. I think that's the beauty of like Breathless and these smaller game jams. Is it's like, no, it's okay. Like you're just making 8 pages. It's fine if it's crazy and a mess, and you look back at it later and you're like, what was I doing? And it's like you were releasing a game, and that's important. That's huge.
And you finished it. It's not just you started
Yes.
it, it's you finished it.
Yeah. Yeah, start to finish all within a week. And I think having that like copy and paste capability there in order to just be like, okay, I'm not starting with a blank page. I have my narrative idea. Now I have this thing that I can just read through and I can tweak and I can update. And now I'm concerned about like, what are my colors and how do I want to, present this so it's, looks, thematic. It takes away a lot of the hard part of writing something from scratch and lets you really focus on the design and, feelings and vibes of the game that you're trying to put forth.
Yeah, I've seen very in recent years a lot of people, instead of creating like SRDs, they're gonna make creator kit where there's this essentially like more like a conversation talking about game mechanics and things like that. But I've always thought that an SRD with actual game mechanics, with a template essentially that you can copy and paste, is useful. At least it is for me, because English is not my first language. So if I have an SRD that I can that is already like properly structured and like it's all like edited and I can just kind of adapt it, it helps with the it reduces friction, which I think is important.
No, that's huge. And that's, I mean, that's what I've been doing with RSRDs as well, is basically here's a copy and paste. And it is more work. It's more work to put that together because you got to strip out the original game's themes and vibe and everything. And be like, okay, here is just the copy and paste that you can then take and do whatever you want. And, you know, sometimes you've really got to think, you're like, this whole mechanic is based around a certain vibe. How do I, you know, make it general so people can just use it? So it is work to put that together, but I think it's very worth it.
And I think this is a perfect segue, because you mentioned that you've released your own system reference documents. You've created your own systems, your own rule sets, and made games off of them. And one in particular that I want to talk with you about today is the Hints and Hijinx system. So can you tell me a bit more about what this thing is and the first game that was using this system and how it all happened?
Yeah. So I think so. We made the system and the first game in a 24-hour fever dream, essentially, and it's called Waffles for Esther. And the idea behind the system is that it is a solo detective game where you don't already know the answer to the mystery. It's a little Brindlewood Bay, but kind of it is different, right? That we're not using kind of a PBTA mentality there with like actions and buttons that you push. Instead, it uses kind of the breathless system as the core piece, where you have two abilities, but they have step up and step down, you know, exhausting dice. You still have the like take a breath or mechanic kind of in there to reset your dice, but there's a certain number of locations you can visit, which is very built off of Substratum, right? Certain number of locations, you need to collect clues, and then you got to string those clues together. And the number of clues that you use to make your hypothesis like steps up a special deduction dice. And then you can use that dice to see how correct you were in your deduction. Was that the right answer? So the more clues you ultimately end up with, the more likely you have solved the mystery and that the answer that you've come up with is the correct answer. But that was directly inspired by, you know, that exhaustion mechanic behind um, Breathless and my work with Substratum Protocol. I was like, okay, yeah, I want to do this, but what if it was for mysteries? And yeah, we ended up with this silly little game where like you're a diner waitress and your regular has gone missing as you go out to deliver waffles to them, and you take it upon yourself to uncover the plot as to why they went missing. And it can be something super silly. We've got clues in there where like secret societies come about, but also like, you know, flour covered fingerprints and, you know, silly bakery stuff in there as well.
Yeah, no, I remember when it came out, I showed it to my wife, and she was like, "Can I play it?" Because it's a solo game. Like
Yeah,
it's
I
entirely playable
remember the
solo.
map she made.
Yeah, like
It's amazing.
she sat down in the kitchen and started like painting and drawing her adventure. I think you sold her to TTRPGs better than myself, which is like bravo. But yeah,
I
like
feel like that's something that Pandion, like Pandion's design is meant to do, is to like a lot of people make games for other tabletop role playing people, which is fantastic. I think that's amazing. I'm one of them. But there's also like tons of people that are like, I'm not really here for hack and slash. That seems weird. And it's, you know, a lot of the games I make is, you know, my target audience will say is not traditional TTRPG players. So I'm actually really happy to hear that, because it's just like, man, if you're into like Black Hack and Mouse Ritter and Knave and Cairn and D&D. Like Waffles for Esther might be a really weird sell to you. You're like, what? I don't know. This is weird. But people that are not in it at all and they're like, I want to tell a story. This seems fun. Like, can I just roll some dice? That's it for them, right? So I love that.
No, this is great. I want to talk to you about something else related to Waffles for Esther, but we're going to take a short break and come
Yes,
back right after. So, all right, talk in a sec. Okay,
we're
welcome
back.
back. Yeah, we also took the time to fix some technical issues with Andy's camera, but now everything should be good. So,
Hoping.
hoping.
Yeah, apologies for that flicker on the camera. Well, hopefully that's all fixed now.
Yeah, no, it looks good.
Cool.
So, one thing I wanted to talk to you about, we've just talked about like Waffles for Hester, which was kind
Mhm.
of using its own system, taking some inspiration from things that you were playing with Breathless Inside Substratum Protocol version 1.
Mhm.
But once you finished the game, that game also blew up in terms of like that was in the like the time of like TTRPG Twitter at the time, and people really
Yeah.
connected with that game. It blew up on itch, and then there's a spark. There's something that popped into your head, and you said, "What if other people could make something off of what I made?" And then
Yeah.
you made an SRD art of it. So like,
Mhm.
what happened? Like, what's the story there?
Yeah, so we ended up like, and this comes back to the question of like, when you like, at what point is it no longer a hack of the original system and it becomes its own system? And I feel like Hints and Hijinks became that, whereas like, okay, we took the dice piece from Breathless, and we took the unknown mystery from this other, from Brindlewood Bay and some other things, and we pieced it all together, and it is his own system now, even though it's inspired by a bunch of others. And so we created an SRD and hosted a game jam for it, and tons of people came in and built games. And I think one of the attractions, just like Breathless, is we had copy and paste rules, and I even put up like a template of like the A5 landscape that kind of like outlined what each page should be, that people could just fill in. And we had a bunch of people come in and make these really wonderful different adventure mysteries that you could go on. Uh, and I don't know how many are actually in the world right now. I think it's like 25 to 30 games at this point. A lot of people have gone to print with them. Even I'm at the point where I am reaching out to creators that have made some really cool Hints and Hijinks games. I'm like, can I print those for you? And I would love for like being able to like offer like a big mystery bundle in the future of all these different games. But yeah, it just kind of exploded. And they're easy to make. They can be very thematic. They're all very different, things that you can do with these games. Um, but they're always fun and interesting, right? So I think that's the trifecta of like, you can make them thematic, they're easy to make and get your hands on, and it's easy to get them out the door, right? It's easy to get people to look at them because they're not 100-page game. They're these little 12-page, where it's like, here's 8 tables and opening, and the core rules are the same as this game that you just played, but the story and the mystery is totally different. People are like, yes, please give me that.
Yeah, I feel like it's the kind of system, and I think that's the beauty of it is that it's super accessible. Like you can
Mhm.
get into it very quickly, but it's also expendable. As in, like once you start understanding the system, you can kind of breathe more into it and make it like tweak it in different direction and make it bigger. Like accessible yet expendable, and I think that's the beauty
Yeah.
of Instant Hijinks.
Yeah, and it's modular, right? Like it's the rules are important, and they follow a reasoning as to why each of those rules are there, but they're not so interwoven that if you want to add in something, it breaks everything else. So you could be like, well, for instance, Ugarian Matthew John, he created the Cold Dark, and instead of it being a mystery, it was a survival game where you're collecting resources instead of clues, and at the end you have confrontation with a beast, and you
Brilliant.
don't know how that's going to go. And instead of a deduction of like what was the mystery that happened, he was like, well, how do you prepare to confront the beast? Right. And the more you prepare, the more likely that you're going to win against it.
Oh, that's so
Same
good.
system, totally different application. So people are doing really cool stuff with that. There's a superhero one called Sidekick, where you actually play the sidekick of a superhero, and it's done in this really cool comic style. There's another one about a cocaine bear grandmother, which is one of my favorites. And it is like you play as a bear that is, I think it's been framed, or you have lost your cocaine that was snuck away in your honey jar or something to that, like something like that. Is absolutely
Oh,
crazy.
wow.
And I love that game. I want to get it in print so bad. It's still digital only, but I want to sell that game. Right, like I want as many people to play that as possible. But yeah, there's just all sorts of creativity there. And I love it. I think it's amazing.
Yeah, no, totally. So like we continue down the timeline of like Andy
Yes.
experiencing through different phases of the breathless system. So like at some point, I think it maybe it came out of one of our conversations. I forgot, but like at some point, actually, like I will let you answer that because at some point you decided to go back to Substratum protocol and not just change a couple of things, fix a couple of typos. No, you redid the whole thing, and now it's a hardcover book. You made a full crowdfunding campaign for it.
Yeah.
What prompted that decision? Because also I own that book. I should go and fetch it, but yeah, you probably have it. It's
I was like,
beautiful.
I have all my books right here. But yeah, so this is this guy here. Yeah, it's a full hardcover with like amazing art inside that Galen put together for us. This was actually the first game where I actually had an artist and editor on the team, which was pretty cool. So what started it was it's kind of two things. One, I had just finished with Hints and Hijinx, and I was like, well, what if it could also be multiplayer? How would you do, like, you have your solo game that is the mysteries unknown, but how would you do it with a multiplayer game where you have a GM and the mystery is still unknown, or the answer to the mystery is still unknown? Like, how would that work? And that was happening at the same time that Backer Kit was going from just only being a pledge manager to having a crowdfunding platform. And I was like, I never, like, Kickstarter always was really scary to me, but I was like, this is brand new. Like, maybe they'll actually be willing to like chat with me and like provide me support and walk me through it. Very handholdy, right? Because I was really nervous, and I was like, okay, I want to figure out crowdfunding and how that works. And then also I have this idea of like I want to make a multiplayer Hints and Hijinks game. And I was like, well, Substratum Protocol is technically a mystery game on the Breathless system, so it's pretty close already. Let's add in some additional features and write it out and really expand it, because I thought there was a lot of really cool stuff we could do, like all the different depths and sectors. And I was like, there's things that I had thought about where I was just like, I can't fit this on 8 pages, let alone 4. But what if I just removed the page limit from myself and kind of reworked it? And so that's kind of how it started. And I ended up also looking at, you had released another game in between then called Firelights that had this card draw mechanic where you were rolling dice against the two cards that you'd drawn. And then I believe you were taking the card into your hand, to that effect. And I was like, I really like that, because instead of deuterium powering your suit, it's these cards that could be used to power the suit. And so it's built into the checks automatically. And as you succeed at checks, you get resources to then use the power of your suit. And then, right. And it just kind of like snowballed from there. I also really liked the idea of chaining actions together, which is what that came from Firelights as well. So, like, if you confront something and you take the confront action, you fail the confront action, you immediately have to take the defend action. And then the defend action is where you can start taking like hits to your stress, but you're also degrading your dice again because you're being forced to roll again. right? So it's
Right.
this like double whammy that's happening. It was just so cool. But yeah, so that's kind of how it came about, is like, and this is a lot of like me talking to you and you talking to me, and spitballing ideas together. And so again, it kind of came organically. I want nobody to be under the impression that I, as a game designer and a business owner, am well organized. Everything's by the seat of my pants as it comes out. Like, RP will be like, hey, have you thought about this? And I'm like, everything else just goes to the sidelines and we're just focusing on this for the next 6 months. Like, that's how I run my business, and it is terrifying, but also I love it. That's why I'm indie. Right.
Have you seen the little graphics that some designers are starting to put out? I think it was Inokoto who made it first. I don't know, where it's like, oh, what I'm working on and like the different status of the different
Yes.
projects and things like that. But I
Yep.
could never do this.
No. Alan, our writer on Midnight Muscadines, he does all sorts of. He's also a great designer. He's amazing. But he will release on his newsletter. He's like, here's all the things I'm working on and all the stages they're in and what's coming up next. And I'm like, I'm really happy that you're that organized. Because I hire you to do a bunch of writing and you're amazing and you get it to me in a timely fashion. It's awesome. I am not that organized. I barely keep my projects straight. Luckily, they all come together because I've been doing complex projects in my day job for 20 years. So, like, it just works. But I'm not that organized. I don't think I can be. I don't want to be, because the creativity pulls me where the interest is, right? Like, I'm doing this to be creative and have fun and things like that.
So let me ask you
And
this then, because I'm very curious about,
yeah,
like, you mentioned that like Substratum Protocol was like the first version was made in a week, but then
yeah,
this bigger version probably took a while longer. So like,
yeah.
how long did it take? And also, how did you stay focused on it?
Mhm. So this one took, so Substratum Protocol, I believe, start to finish was about 6 to 8 months, start to finish. And a lot of that was going back and forth to talk about, how the mechanics fit together, and getting playtester feedback, and making the art, and writing and updating and doing the tables, right? Like, there was a lot of fiddly bits to it to make sure it worked. Um, and we actually got it out pretty quick. By the time we ran the campaign, it was pretty much done. Right, there was some things that I had to change last minute because I was like, "This doesn't make sense." Oh no, and just completely rewrote the game from scratch in a month, which is terrifying. I still remember like reaching out to our editor and being like, "Hey, I'm gonna have to pay you more money because I'm having to rewrite like half the game like today. I'm so sorry." And he's like, "Whatever, man. Like, you're good. Pass it up." Um, but yeah, the 8 months to stay focused on that, it was honestly like, have other side projects. Like, this was a big project, but I couldn't focus 100% on it. It had to be like, I'm going to work on this until I hit kind of a roadblock, and then I have some other little things that I can work on, even if it's just like world building, or like we ended up publishing. I believe we published 3 other Hints and Hijinx games, just the solo versions, while we were working on Substratum Protocol. That's
Wow.
where like Hamsters and Himbos and Jester's King's Dance, and there's another one in there. I've published more. I don't know. There's more. But like, that stuff is still going on in the background. And so like, I try to have like, here's a flagship project, right? Like a big project, that's Substratum Protocol, that's Midnight Muscadines, right? Huge projects that require a lot of time, investment, people working on it, that kind of thing. But then I'm also like, direct to VHS projects as well, right? And those are the smaller ones that I get to have fun with. That's, like Whispers in the Walls. Never got a crowdfunding project. Nobody knew it was released until after it was released. Even with Midnight Muscadines right now, I worked on like the second edition updates for 2 of the Hints and Hijinks games with fresh art and layout, and I wanted to expand it with player journals and more like solo play guidance and stuff like that. I'm working on that when I'm completely burned out on the big project, because you'll get burned out if you work on it every single day. So like, like, okay, let's work on something small. Okay, now we're gonna go back. Okay, I'm just gonna play video games for a week because I just need to like refresh and like think of new things or not think of this so I can come back to it fresh. But I think that's like you have to take breaks from the big projects.
I this is like a gemstone, like the fact that like I ask you how do you stay focused, and the answer is I don't,
I
and
don't.
that's how it works, right? Like
Mhm.
and I think it's very important. You're right. Like we should take breaks because at some point we're just exhausted, creatively exhausted, or just like physically
Yeah.
exhausted, and taking breaks can help. And consuming other medias, video games, you get more inspiration, which you can then
Yeah.
inject back into your
Oh
project.
yeah. And also releasing smaller tidbits. So I've gotten so much creative motivation from people talking to me about either Substratum 1E or like when we released a preview PDF of Midnight Muscadines, people coming in and like, hey, so I made this character, or I did this thing, or I had this thought, and you're like, that's brilliant. I'm now remotivated and like re-energized because you're engaging with it and you've had these ideas. And now I'm having ideas again, right? So I think like if I was going to give a tip to somebody that was kind of just getting started, it's like release something. You can come back to it and iterate on it later, especially if it's digital. You can come back to it. You can be like, here's a one version 1.1, it now has cover art. And here's version 1.2. It now has, the tables actually have proper headers and I've cleaned up the layout a little bit, right? Like you can iterate on things as you get inspired and as you learn more about the tools that you're using to make these things.
Yeah, no, this is brilliant. Like I absolutely love this. It's great because you can iterate, right? It's not like
Mhm.
it's not something that's set in stone. You can make it better over
Yeah.
time, and like it must be so refreshing when you make like a V1 of a project and then you learn a lot. Like you make your game better, like not your game but your game, your skills, right? You get better
Yeah.
at what you do, and then you come back to like I can make this so much better now, and comparing the two must be like inspiring to some extent.
Oh yeah, it helps you see like how you've grown to go back to a project that you released a year, 2 years, 3 years ago, and be like, I'm gonna redo this. I'm gonna redo this. I'm gonna update it. I'm gonna like it'll be a small release, right? Like I'm not trying to do a crowdfunding campaign or anything for that. It always becomes a crowdfunding campaign though. But like and and you release it and then you can be like, here was the first edition and here's where it's at now. And maybe there's one in the middle and here's where it's at now. And they're just totally different levels of release, but there wasn't anything wrong with the first one. It's just where you were at, right? And I think that's super important. Is like a lot of creators are going to want to be like, oh, I want to release something that's super polished. Nah, don't. You don't need to do that. You don't need to do that. You can't. I mean, if you have the skills already, if you're a graphic designer by trade and you already know layout and you already know art, all this stuff, sure, go for it. But most of us just get something out there. It's probably going to look terrible. That's okay. All of my first games as Pandion games were awful looking. They were fine. They were awful looking. And we go back and we're like, why didn't I concern myself with, the letting of the type and, paragraph spacing and why is this header at a different height than this header? It doesn't make sense. Why did I do this? And it's like, well, you didn't know to look for it, right? And now you do, and that's great. But you had to release that game in that state first just to get something made. I think that's super, super important.
Yeah, I think that's a great way to end this interview. So
Yeah.
Andy, before we close this amazing time that we've had together today,
Yeah.
I would love to know like what's next for Penny and Games, and what are you working on now? Anything you want to plug that you want people to?
Yeah. So we are working on, I mentioned a couple times, Midnight Muscadines. It's our current big game. It just wrapped up crowdfunding. There's a preview version available, and we just opened the pre-order store as well. You can find all of that at pandiongames.com/muscadines. And you can also find it on pandiongames.itch.io is where the preview is. So you can grab the preview. We're also running events for character creation workshops and all sorts of fun stuff like that. But you can find all of our work at pandiongames.com and pandiongames.itch.io. And yeah, I mean, we're having a great time. There are several small like side projects I'm working on, but I'm not ready to talk about those publicly. Um, one thing that I really love to do is go back and actually run a game jam for Substratum Protocol and get additional depth sectors, right? Like all of these cool little depths. The neat thing about the game is that you can like throw in depths at different levels, and so I would love for people to come and make really cool different layers for people to explore that they can like plug into the Substratum Pro expeditions that they're going on.
Yeah, no, that's yeah. I think a Substratum protocol like jam would be so cool, just because like the game people have so many amazing ideas and they get passionate about those games and they can like create something for it, and then it just makes more content for people playing the game, right? So, which is great.
Yeah, exactly. That's
Andy,
it.
thank you so much for taking your lunch break today with
Definitely.
me for this thing that may or may not be called TTRPG Takeout. Like we'll see, but I truly appreciate you taking the time. I had a blast talking with you, and I hope that people participating in the Breathless Jam Second Edition will get to learn a lot from your tips and tricks, because I think this was beautifully insightful.
Thank you so much. Yeah, I appreciate you having me on.
Thank you. All right. Well, thanks everyone for watching. If you liked the interview, don't forget to like and subscribe. Also, there's a comment section at the bottom of this video. If you have questions for Andy, drop them below, and I'm sure he's going to come around and answer them. But yeah, also, don't forget to join the Breathless Jam Second Edition. We're at almost 120 participants. There's still like almost a month to submit your content. And like Andy said, you just need to create something. Doesn't need to be perfect. Just make something and publish it. All right. Talk to y'all soon. Cheers.